So guys, it is my 100th subscriber special. I have not done a reaction in a while. I have not done a Nick Fuentes reaction. First of all, I want to thank everyone who has subscribed to me. I know 100 subscribers, huge victory. I have some Snickers, I have some Kit Kat, and I have a bit of milk. We're gonna watch the Piers Morgan Nick Fuentes interview. I was kind of halfway through it actually, kind of cheated. But yeah, let's hop in.
You've also said you don't want to live near black people. Let's take a listen to this clip.
I'm a new generation of white person. I'm not living around blacks. Sorry. You know, I want white kids, and I don't want my white kids bringing home black people to marry.
That is ruthless, rough. That is, I mean, that is a sharp opinion.
It's racial for me. And call me racist. Oh, very Christian of you. I don't give a fuck.
I mean, it couldn't be clearer, really. Unless you want to say that's another of your jokes, but you're basically saying, yeah, I'm a racist, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
You're fine with saying you're a racist?
Totally. I think everybody's racist. I think everybody, if we're being honest, is racist. I think everybody, the only people that aren't racist or pretend not to be are white people to their detriment. Everybody else is racist.
But earlier in the interview, you got aggrieved at the idea that your father was a racist. You wanted to make emphatically sure.
Yeah, because my father's...
He's not.
Because my father doesn't share my same views on that.
So he's the exception to the everyone's a racist.
Everybody's a little bit racist. You're right. So maybe everybody... The difference is you're attacking my father. You know, he can get fired from his job.
I'm not attacking your father.
You are.
No, I'm not. I don't know your father. And to be clear, I have no knowledge about him at all
Well, then let's leave him out of it. Let's leave him out of it if you don't know him.
Hang on, Nick. You put that story into the public domain on your show. I'm simply reminding you of what you told everybody, millions of people, about your father. If you now want to retract it, fine. If you want to say it was a joke, which is what your position was earlier, fine. But I'm allowed to put to you things you said publicly. That's not unfair. That's not me targeting your father. You put that story about him out there.
You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm asking you about a pretty shocking anecdote, which to me looked like you were saying your father made decisions about where you as a family would eat based on skin color of people who worked at these places. If you say, or use them, if you say that is not what you meant, that's fine. You can respond any way you like. But the idea I can't ask you about it without you saying I'm attacking your father is ridiculous.
Well, you are, and you know what you're doing. And there's a political culture in America where if you have the wrong views, you get fired from your job. And my father has a job, and if you go on here and say you charge him with racism or something, and I'm put in a position where I don't look like I'm sticking to my guns if I don't say my father's a racist, you're putting him in jeopardy, and he's not here to defend himself or explain his views. And it's very low, and I think you know exactly what you're doing, and people can see what you're doing. I'll defend my views, and I think that, you know, so let's leave him out of it. Let's just not talk about my father, because my father isn't here. I'm here.
Okay, well,
I'll
then do you accept that you shouldn't talk?
Okay,
listen, that's fine. But then do you accept you shouldn't talk about your father on your show? And you shouldn't tell...
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So it's fine for you to put a story out there which would make most people who listened to that story or watched it at the time on your show conclude that he was racist. It's fine for you to do that. But if I then ask you about it, I'm the one who's being unfair and I've crossed a line. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're being malicious.
Okay, that's fine.
Nick he's caught a little bit. And I think this is the issue with Nick Fuentes, is that he is racist, but he just doesn't want the baggage of racism or the responsibility of it when it's put to him. Because there's plenty of interviews, plenty of times when he says he isn't a racist. He says he doesn't have prejudices or whatever, but then he does. So yeah, I think Piers Morgan I would argue, is probably the only interviewer who's actually managed to kind of get Nick Fuentes. He's getting him by showing him what he himself said, and he's not misrepresenting Nick. I think this is just an issue with Nick's strategy or his character. It's just a little bit, I don't know if it's inconsistent is the word, but peculiar. It's just, it doesn't work. Like he wants to be racist without the racism. He doesn't want, and I think this is just where like reality and his views or the consequences of them kind of butt heads. Like this is where it's not really gelling. Well, like I know what he means about like, you know, trying to preserve his little, you know, his white town and that kind of thing. He doesn't do himself any favors when he kind of gets himself stuck in these kind of circles.
They can draw their own conclusions about whether what I just
and they
did.
Will. And,
yeah, and I'm sure afterwards, by the way, you'll say he ambushed me with your own words.
With your own words. That's a little presumptuous. I'm not going to say it's an ambush, but I think that's a low blow. And I think you know what you're doing, and that's fine. You're a tabloid journalist.
And I think this is very typical when a British journalist interviews an American kind of personality. This is the same thing that happened with Ben Shapiro with the BBC. The thing about the English is that they're very cunning. They know how to get you without getting, and that's exactly what's happening right now.
I expected that. I don't think it's an ambush because I knew it would be like this. And people will see what you're doing, and I think they'll say it's low. But as far as you want to talk about racism,
I do.
Let's talk about racism. Let's leave my dad out of it.
Look, you've admitted you're a racist, correct?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Own it.
Okay, that's fine. You're perfectly entitled in a free democratic society to stare down the barrel of his camera and tell me you're a racist. People can judge you accordingly. Many people who have assumed that you're a racist will now have heard it from your own lips. That's fine.
There you go.
That's the point. The point of this interview is to go over the things you've said, which have led people to reach conclusions about you, and to ascertain whether those conclusions are fair and reasonable or not. That's it. So I want to play you another clip. This is where you talk about why white people are justified in being racist. Let's take a listen to this.
First, white people are every single bit justified in being racist. Every single bit justified, to the extent that that means going out of your way to avoid black people when you see them.
You stand by that?
Absolutely.
So white people should go out of their way to avoid black people when they see them?
Absolutely. They would be wise.
Why?
Because it's a lose-lose proposition. If you're Irina Zarutska and you don't walk the other way, you get stabbed to death and you die. If you're somebody else and you walk on the subway and you stand near a black person or something, maybe it's fine. It's a lose-lose proposition. So no, I think that white people have been beaten into submission, that we're afraid to tell the truth about it. And the truth is that when you go into these major cities like New York or Chicago, I believe she was in North Carolina, there is a menace, which is young, black, adolescent men. They're extremely violent. And we have been told that we have to pretend like they are every other person. We have to be colorblind to that. And we're supposed to go and be in the midst of all this danger. And I think that at this point, it's gotten out of control. You look at the BLM movement, they said that the reason that black people, are violent, or the reason there's crime, is because of police brutality, or redlining, or all these other things. They said we need to get rid of the police. We need to defund them. And a lot of cities did. A lot of cities like Chicago, for example, the police changed the rules of engagement. They don't chase them. It's not a felony if you steal a certain amount of merchandise. They won't chase them on foot. And now the city's totally up for grabs. And now, whether you're in the Gold Coast or whether you're on the Mag Mile or you're in the worst neighborhoods in the city, you might get shot, you might get mugged, someone might run up on you. And I tell my followers, it is better to be perceived as racist or racist and walk the other way and maybe keep your life than to say, I'm a good anti-racist. I don't mind that this person's making me uncomfortable. Maybe he's looking a little froggy. I'm going to sit down because I'm a good person, and get stabbed, mugged, whatever. And by the way, this is a strategy. They call it the friendly stranger. There's a crew of them. They do this in Chicago. They stand outside bars, black people. They approach strangers. It's a robbery crew. And they pretend to be a friendly stranger, and then they mug them. And stupid white people say, oh, hi, yeah, nice to meet you. You know, they grin, they laugh, they put up with the nonsense, and then they get mugged, or worse. Sometimes they get executed. And so as a white person,
how do you feel about mass shootings at school?
I think they're bad.
Who do you think commits the vast majority of the mass shootings?
I'm sure it's white people.
Right. So how do you feel about that?
I think that white people do more antisocial violence. I think black people participate in more gang violence. I think that's the difference.
What's the difference to the victim?
There's no difference to the victim, but it's a different kind of crime, and it's a different proportion also. Do you know what percentage of white people are school shooters?
I know that the vast majority of mass shootings in schools in America this century were perpetrated by young white men. And I'm
And
just
what proportion of
and
what
I'm
proportion?
curious.
What proportion?
I'm curious whether your advice would be to people who have kids in
Wait,
these
is my
schools.
mic working?
What
proportion?
Should they avoid white people at school? Should people with the kids at school avoid young white men at school?
No.
Okay.
Do you know what per capita means? Do you know proportionality? There are more black people proportionally that engage in violent crime or are involved in gangs, especially in these major cities, than there are white people that are school shooters compared to the entire white population. And everybody understands that.
Two-thirds of mass shootings at school perpetrated by white people.
But what proportion of white men commit school shootings? That's the question.
I've just told you. It's 60-65% of school shootings by white people.
You're telling me what proportion of school shootings are committed by white people. I'm saying what proportion of white people have committed school shootings. Are you playing dumb, or are you just not that smart?
What difference does
What's
that make to the children lying dead on the ground?
See, now you want to jump on the victims. The difference is you're asking, would you fear white people or black people? And that's the difference. The difference is in terms
What I'm saying
of
to you is, by your logic, if we now have agreed that the vast majority of mass shootings in schools are committed by white people and predominantly young white men, then presumably your advice would be to avoid young white men because they perpetrate these massacres. But it won't be because they're white, right?
So are you playing dumb, or are you actually dumb?
Maybe
it's
I'm
about
dumb.
proportionality.
Maybe I'm dumb.
You are because well, I don't think you are dumb. I think you're smart actually, but you're deliberately avoiding per capita. And everybody knows that's the difference. What proportion of white men are school shooters? It's probably 0.00001%. What proportion of black men have committed violent crimes? It's probably like 5%. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it's very high. And I would add to that, even as it concerns schools, why do you think parents pay a super high property tax to live in a school district where there's white people? Because they know that if they go to the black school, it's going to be the Bloods and the Crips. It's going to be gangs. It's going to be, you talk about school shootings. Nobody talks about all the school shootings that are committed by gangbangers in and around the school, and all the other violence that's associated with that. I mean, these schools in the south side of Chicago, it's just not livable.
I have an answer for you, Nick. So the proportion of the population who carry out mass shootings is actually the same for black and white.
For white people, the proportion of
the proportion
again,
of the
are you
population.
hearing it? No.
See, I
What's
think the trouble with your
proportion?
statistics is a lot of them don't bear much scrutiny. We have a bunch of fact checkers checking all this in real time, because you do have a tendency to just come out with a lot of old baloney. And when you say,
Okay.
well, it's true. And when you're confronted with
what's the
reality,
figure?
you don't like it.
What's the figure? What proportion of white people have committed school shootings? With white people as the denominator and white people that have committed school shootings as the numerator, what's that percentage?
For both black and whites, the proportion of the population who carry out mass shootings generally is about the same.
No. Tell me the number, and then
the only focus of your attention is the black shootings, the black crime. You don't want to live around black people. You want to avoid black people. You don't want interracial marriages or relationships that may produce black people. And yet, when I point out to you that there are many parts of crime in America where actually there's a majority of white people that perpetrate them, you don't care. You don't have any interest in that. It doesn't exercise your mind. Maybe because
No,
you don't.
see, no one's
maybe 'cause you
buying
don't
this.
have
This
kids.
argument lost. No one is buying this. Everybody understands per capita, and people could even see what you race ahead and say, well, we're comparing the proportion of white and black school shooters. I said, no, compare the proportion of school shooters that are white versus violent criminals that are black, because that was the basis of the monologue, is that you're very likely, if you encounter black people or a young black man in the city, that you're going to be the victim of a violent crime, of a robbery, a mugging, a car theft, a carjacking, or a murder. That's the difference, and it's about proportionality. And everybody sees past that because we all live in reality. You want to talk about product of your environment? People that live in New York, Chicago, LA, we live in reality. We live in this environment, and we see what it's like. And the threat, the danger, in terms of probability, it's not even comparable. And I would say this, to your point. If you're in a high school and truly, if you see a white person who looks like a little autistic, he's got the SSRI stare, and he reaches for a backpack, people joke and say, run. Similarly, if you see a jalopy pulling up with a bunch of black people in it and they got their pants around the ankles, you're going to run also. And I'm saying the same thing. The difference is, the latter happens much more often. It's much more common. You know, in Chicago, there's like 10,000 carjackings and car thefts every day. It's in the thousands. It happens all the time. How many mass shootings committed by autistic SSRI white people? I don't even know. I mean, it's probably in the single digits in the last decade in this city. That's the difference, and everybody knows that. But you're really just trying to carry water for liberal ideology. It's an ideological position.
I'm not. No, I'm really not. I can absolutely say, yes, there is way too much black on black crime, for example, involving guns in Chicago.
And black on white also.
Yes, but there is way too much gun violence in Chicago, right? I mean, it's indisputable. I've got no problem saying that. The difference is I don't then lead myself into a thought process where I have to avoid all black people in case they shoot me. And you've already conceded that you are a racist. So when people hear you then say, I don't want to be living anywhere near black people, they already have heard you say, I'm a racist. So they assume you're doing that because of people's skin color. I don't think you would probably dispute that, right?
Yeah, and this is Nick Fuentes' issue. He just admitted that he was racist. So the problem here is that everything that he judges or assesses is now tainted with an unfair bias. That being said, I understand his bro science logic.
Well, you're separating two different things. The monologue, when I said I don't want to live around black people, that was after Irina Zarutska got shot. And it's true. I mean, they are a largely in this city, in Chicago, the South Side, the West Side, huge criminal population. And I don't want to live anywhere near it. And I want to live in a white neighborhood. I think that that's extremely desirable. And I think even black people do.
Nick, you're perfectly entitled to that view. But when you have obviously prefaced all this by saying, I am a racist, unashamedly, then people will assume that all your thought processes about all of these issues are driven by an aversion to people based on their skin color, which is the purest personification of racism.
Well, it's not an aversion. I would say it's the opposite. I like my own people. My own people are familiar to me, and I think that's true across the board. I think that people seek out other people that are like themselves, and every other group does this, whether it's blacks, Hispanics, Asians. You know, I get a lot of attacks when I talk about that I'm against interracial marriage. And what's funny is that every other group is against interracial or interethnic marriage. Jews,
but you're the
Chinese,
you're the
black
product
people,
of an
Hispanics.
interracial marriage.
Yeah, I mean, that's debatable.
Not
Let's say
really.
for the sake of
Not
argument,
really.
sure.
No, you're the product of an interracial marriage, and your father is part Mexican. You're literally,
For the sake of argument,
the
we can
very
say
person
sure.
you've just told me you want to avoid.
What race is Hispanic? Is that a race?
Well, what do you think it is?
I'm asking you, what race is Hispanic?
Hispanic, of course it's a race. It's called Hispanic.
It's a mix between two races. It's a mix between indigenous Americans
It's not
and
white, though,
Europeans.
is it? It's not white.
Well, apparently you're more of a racial purist than me. You got like
Not
a
really. You just
one-drop
keep
rule
saying
thing
you
going.
only want to live in a
Kind of.
white neighborhood, but you're literally from a mixed race background yourself. You've literally
and I
got
live in
Mexican blood.
I know, and I live in a non-white neighborhood too. I'm trying to get out of here, though. But I'm trying to get out. But here's the thing.
Do you have any non-white? Do you have any non-white friends? Genuine question.
Most of my friends are non-white. Most of my friends are not, and non-white people love my show.
How many are black?
The honesty.
How many of your friends are black?
Many of them, like at least a dozen.
Wow.
Ye being one who you know, Sneeko being another who you also know.
Yeah. And so how do they feel when you say you just want to be away from any black people, walk away from them?
Well, you know what Ye told me? I'll tell you verbatim what he said. He said, so you use the N-word. I said, yeah. He goes, well, when niggas are being niggas. I said, so true. That's so true. So they feel like they're in complete agreement with me.
What does that mean?
It means that even black people know how black people can behave. Even black people understand it. And they know that it doesn't come from a place of, and you use the word aversion. That's the first thing I'll actually dispute.
Okay.
It's not an aversion on the basis of skin color, because that would seem to suggest it's like a stubborn, irrational bigotry. I don't consider myself a bigot. I consider myself a racial realist. I'm realistic about how the races are, and I speak provocatively about it. And I speak provocatively about our tribalistic instincts and tendencies as human beings. And I'm not a liberal ideologue that says that over time and with enough education, we're all going to see this great brotherhood where we're colorblind and everybody's the same. You know, I don't think that's ever going away. I think that race is real. It's not just skin deep. It matters to us and it matters to each other. And black people know that, and Hispanics know that, and Asians know that, and people like me that have partial Mexican ancestry, we know that too. And I think on that basis, we can have mutual respect and understanding, not aversion based on skin color.
The reason I use the word aversion is you literally said that you should walk the other way if you see black people. That is an aversion to black people based on their skin color.
No, that's called economy of information. That's economy of information. That's safety. And I said in the same monologue, if you watch it, it's like, I feel sorry. The problem is you clip the 10 seconds. I don't know if you watched the whole show, but in that monologue, I said, most black people are not violent or criminals. I said, and it's unfortunate that we're going to offend them when we turn and walk the other way. I said, but the problem is we don't know. We can't tell. And someone like Irina Zarutska, she sat down in front of a black man with her headphones in and wasn't paying attention because she was being a good liberal and said, I'm not uncomfortable by this. I'm progressive. Then she got stabbed in the neck. And I said, it's unfortunate that you would have to sit behind the black man to be safe. And if he's not violent or schizophrenic, he might be offended by that. I said, but I would rather offend him than die.
How many deranged white men have committed atrocious acts of murder in the last 10 years in America?
Proportionally, far fewer.
But how many?
Fewer.
How many? Do you know how many?
You have a research team. You pull it up. I don't have it in front of me.
You're obviously extremely exercised by that one story, which was horrific, for the record. Absolutely horrific, and should never have happened. The person who perpetrated that evil act had a string of previous offenses and should have been picked up more, and it should have been amplified more. I completely concur with all of that. But I just suspect you have no idea how many white people have committed similar crimes, do you?
No, because I know it's far fewer from experience.
Okay.
Because it's like you said. Well, and hang on, and I would add to that, you know, Irina Zarutska wasn't the first one. That was also after Austin Metcalf was killed in Texas.
Sure.
After
Carmelo
Carmelo
Anthony
Anthony
stabbed him in the neck. How many times has it been perpetrated by white people?
Well, hang on, let me finish my point.
But you're implying that white people don't do this. And my point to you, Nick Fuentes, is of course.
Oh, I never said white people don't do it.
Of course, deranged white people commit heinous acts. But you don't either know.
No disagreement.
You neither know nor care, or maybe both. Maybe you do know but don't care. You only seem to be focused on black people who commit crimes. And again, if you hadn't prefaced the whole debate about racism by openly conceding you are a racist, I could read other connotations into what you've been saying. But once you've said, I'm a racist, and then you only talk about black crime, I think people can watch this and they can say, yeah, he's a racist. And everything that he says about crime is driven through the prism of being a racist who judges people according to their skin color.
Well, it's funny because it's quite on the contrary. And I said this in a similar monologue. You know, the problem is not that I wake up and I walk down the street and I see someone that doesn't look like me and it makes me angry. The problem is there's a pattern of behavior, which we've all seen. Blacks in America have become narcissistic, and they become narcissistic because they've been told they're victims of racism, they're victims of slavery. They've been told, really, there's no accountability. If they're rude, if they're inconsiderate, if they're criminal, they are told that they have no agency for their actions. They're being told, if you act in this way, it's because the white man made you that way. It's because the system's rigged against you. And so we have been telling black people this for a generation, and now there's no rules. Now they go, and what we hate to see as decent people, not even as white people, but decent people, even black people too, what we hate to see is rudeness, obnoxiousness, inconsideration, criminality, violence, and that's that pattern of behavior that we see all over social media. On
so
the
just to be clear,
footage,
you don't like black people who play the victim and are rude. Is that your position?
I don't like that pattern of behavior.
And who are narcissists?
I see where this is going.
Yeah, you're ahead of me.
Turn this around on me.
You're ahead of me, aren't you? Because when I said, what black friends have you got? You say,
I am kind of black, aren't I?
No, not that. You said, I'm not saying you. I'm just saying your choice of black friend is Ye, who is arguably the #1 black victimhood narcissist in America. Do you understand the problem? So he's your friend. He's one of the very few black people you want to be associated with, but he's the epitome of what you just said you abhor about narcissistic black people.
I disagree. I disagree with you, and I'll tell you why. Because Ye, if you've ever met him in real life...
I have, yeah.
Okay, well, then you know. He's nothing but polite, considerate.
Actually, he was very rude to me the last 2 times I interviewed him. He's a supreme narcissist, and he's also...
Well, you keep interrupting me. You're very rude. Are you black? Because you're being very rude by interrupting me right now.
To you.
I'm giving you a hard time, but I do want to finish my point. I do want to finish my point about Ye. He is a guy who, when I was with him, wanted to make sure that everybody was heard. Everybody felt included. He's actually a very soft-spoken guy, very polite, and by the way, not violent. When you look at all the rappers that are in the music game, many of them, especially from Chicago, drill rap, they're talking about killing people, shooting people, they gangbang. He notably, if you know about him, he got his start because he was a nerd. He wore a backpack and a polo, and he wasn't a gangbanger. He rapped about his feelings and girls and his dreams and his ambitions. So, no, and by the way, he would tell me all the time, he doesn't even feel black. They make him feel not black because he doesn't do those things, because he's soft-spoken, because he's artistic, because he's a bit of a nerd or likes fashion. So I would disagree. He's actually not like that at all.
Okay. We're talking he's also a Hitler-loving anti-Semite. And we're going to take a little commercial break here, and we're going to come back and talk about anti-Semitism and your views about Jewish people, and indeed what Ye said about the same subject matter.
So yeah, I think Nick kind of came back there a little bit. Nick has a way, Piers Morgan has a way of framing and characterizing. Very interesting though.
Okay, back with Nick Fuentes. Let's just turn to anti-Semitism. In your interview with Stephen Crowder last week, you answered emphatically that you don't hate all Jews. Is that correct? That's your position?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to play you this clip.
Well, I don't hate any Jews. Let me just amend that. I don't hate any Jews.
Okay. Let's play this clip.
The reason I've had it is because my opposition to world Jewry and Israel is rooted in absolute, uncontestable fact. We have the truth on our side. That's why we're winning. Because we are telling the truth about the historical antagonism between Jews and Europeans, between Jews and Christians. The theological, historical, racial, cultural, and political antagonisms between organized Jewry and the Christians, organized Jewry and Europeans. And the reason that we are winning that argument is because it's real, it's true. I can prove it, I can show you, I can name the names, I can show you the paper trail, the money. That is why we're winning. That is why all of this is raising the consciousness.
When you say you have this opposition to world Jewry, I mean, it's one thing to criticize, for example, the Israeli government over what it's been doing in Gaza. I've done that myself. When you talk about world Jewry, I presume you're talking about the 15 million Jews in the world, and you are opposed to them. How does that square with your position that you don't hate any Jews?
Well, do you take issue with my use of the term world Jewry?
Well, what do you mean by that?
Or do you take issue with it? Do you have a problem with that?
Clarify what you mean by it.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. The gaslighting's crazy because I use that expression on my show all the time. I say organized Jewry, world Jewry. And do you know that for like 30 years, the World Jewish Congress has an annual keynote called the State of World Jewry? Bari Weiss has given it. You can look it up. It's on YouTube. She gives the State of World Jewry address.
But Nick, what do you mean by it?
I mean, you have to talk about, there's a concept of Jewish peoplehood. It's the sense that they are part of a common nationality, a common tribe, a common people. And so where they reside in Israel, the United States or Europe or elsewhere, they see each other above or maybe on a different level alongside their nationality, their state, wherever they reside. If they're in Germany, France, the United States, they see themselves as part of a transnational nation, of an international nation. The Jews in America, the Jews in Israel, they identify as Israeli or American, but they also have something in common. They identify as part of a common nation, which I would say there's a world Jewish population. It's world Jewry. And world Jewry has representatives. There is such a thing as the World Jewish Congress, where they actually elect, it's democratic, all the local Jewish organizations elect representatives to represent proportionally the Jewish population in their area at the World Jewish Congress. And it's sort of like Davos. It's like the World Economic Forum, but it's exclusively for members of the Jewish nation that exists across the world. And so that's a real thing. And I didn't make that up, and that didn't come from 4chan. It's like I said in that clip, I read what they write. I read their books. I watch these speeches. I watch a speech from Bari Weiss. I pay very close attention. So that's what I mean by that. There is such a thing as it's a nation that exists across borders on a global scale. They're organized, and they have a national self-interest as that nation, as that tribe.
So if you don't hate any Jews, what do you like about them?
I like a lot of things about them. I think they're funny. I think they're smart. I think that they're pretty remarkable people. And as Christians, especially as Catholics, we say they're remarkable. And this has been adjudicated in Catholic doctrine for thousands of years. We say that they're a witness people. And so we actually, there's provisions inside of Catholic doctrine that says we need to give them special protections because they were a witness to Christ's passion. So, this is why you can't clip the show. You have to watch the whole thing. I say this repeatedly in interviews. I do think they're remarkable. By definition, they're exceptional people. It's just that there is a sort of natural opposition between them and Christians because of the theology. We believe that Christ is the Messiah. They don't. They have been a minority in Christian lands for thousands of years, and they have been pushed around and expelled, and they've been persecuted and segregated. And that's why there's a lot of paranoia. There's a lot of distrust. There's maybe some sense of chauvinism among Jewish people. So there is, like I said in that clip, there is an historical antagonism between these two peoples, between Christendom and Jewry, and that has always been the case in Europe. But I don't hate them, and I think I actually sort of understand them in a weird way. I think that because I've studied a lot of their politics, I think I really kind of know them in a way, and it doesn't come from a place of hatred.
Do you have any Jewish friends?
I do. I have many, yes.
Well, that's weird because you said this.
Jews and Christians have never been friends, ever. Not since Jesus Christ fought with the Pharisees. Have we ever been friends? Not since Saul was leading the charge persecuting the Christians. Not since the Roman Empire, not since the Middle Ages. Never. We've never been friends. We've never been allies. We've always been set against each other, actually. And even here in the United States, it was communist Jews who were the architects of both communism and the civil rights laws that are dispossessing white Christians of their land and civilization.
the Jews and Christians have never been friends ever, except for you and your Jewish friends.
Yeah, so easy. As peoples, as nations.
Got it.
Not saying every individual Christian, and of course there have been Christians and there have been Christian converts to Judaism, Jewish converts to Christian. You're nodding your head, but you're asking this. I'm saying as peoples, they've never been aligned.
As a
There's been
Roman,
an
I'm a
antagonism.
Catholic like you, and I have many Jewish friends. And I'm just trying to compute what you're trying to say, which is Jews and Christians have never been friends ever. And I'm like, well, you have Jewish friends, I have Jewish friends, we're both Catholics, therefore we're Christians. So it doesn't really quite add up.
Well, like I said, as peoples, there has been an historical antagonism as peoples. And you could even say the same about blacks in the United States. Of course, there were black and white people that were friendly with each other, but in many ways, they were set against each other as groups. And I think that's easy enough to understand.
The reason that many people think you're anti-Semitic is that you have regularly downplayed the Holocaust, and in particular, the number of Jewish people who were murdered by the Nazis. It's been said that you believe no more than several 100,000 have been killed. And I want to play you this clip.
People talk about, well, what about the gas chambers? Well, to the extent that that's real, I find that hard to believe, but to the extent that's real, there have been atrocities committed and genocides committed in all times and all places. Let's acknowledge why Hitler casts the long shadow. Because that confers a political benefit upon Jews. That's why. It doesn't really sound correct to me. Wait a second. It takes 1 hour to cook a batch of cookies, and you have 15 ovens, probably in 4 different kitchens, right? Doing 24 hours a day, every day for 5 years. How long would it take you to make 6 million? I don't know. It certainly wouldn't be 5 years, right? The math doesn't seem to add up there.
You think that's funny?
It's amusing what you're doing because, that one was a joke. But do you want to talk seriously about the Holocaust?
Yeah, I do, actually. I mean, I do, because I just find it extraordinary that you would think the Holocaust could ever be something that we could joke about.
Why, too soon? Is it too soon to make jokes?
How many people do you think died in the Holocaust? How many Jewish people?
I don't know. I'm thinking maybe 7 million. What's the number? 6 million, something like that.
So you
8 million?
You concede that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust?
Possibly more. Possibly, we're discovering all the time. So it could maybe even be more than that.
So why have you doubted the numbers in the past?
I'll tell you why. I really think that every death is a tragedy, however many Jewish people died in the Holocaust. And I'm not a World War II historian, so I'm actually open to believing the official narrative, and I've read some of the conspiracy theories. And to tell you the truth, it's a rigorous debate. But what's interesting about this is in many countries, it's not even legal to talk about it. And that's really where my interest in the Holocaust begins and sort of ends, to tell you the truth, is that if you wanted to question the number, you would be put in jail in about, 17 or 18 European countries. And I think that's really the more interesting conversation, which is that this is almost like a religious dogma in the West. No other genocide, no other atrocity is treated like this. Could you imagine if in the United States they said the number of Palestinians killed in Gaza is 100,000, and if you don't say that, you're going to jail, you're banned on X, you can't have a job? That's the part that's totally insane. And a lot of people, they can't even make up their minds. I think it's actually done a disservice. If your goal, and I'm not saying you as Piers Morgan, but if your goal, if you're an advocate for awareness about this, if your goal is to convince everybody that this is the way the Holocaust happened, I think the last thing you'd want to do is say that everyone that disagrees is in jail and is banned and you're not allowed to say it. So there's really been no open debate about the subject since the scholarship started to be produced about 60 years ago.
But there is no debate to be had about the number of people who were murdered. Even the Nazis in the trials after the war confirmed the numbers. The amount of documentation that was recovered, notwithstanding the attempts by the Nazis to destroy it, the amount of documentation that was saved and preserved and used for trials and for historical record is unprecedented in the history of mass slaughter of human beings. So we have a very clear idea of how many people were gassed to death in the gas chambers. We have a very clear idea of how many were starved to death, were kept in ghettos, died of disease, of forced labor, of death marches. We know how many Jews were slaughtered. It's at least 6 million. What's interesting to me is that you appear to now concede that, which may be news to a lot of your regular viewers who have constantly heard you quibble with the number of Jews who died in the Holocaust. And for the record, just to confirm what I think you told me, you do now accept that at least 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust.
Well, no, I said it could even be higher than that.
Well, it could be higher. That is true.
I think it's at least.
But you accept
you're right.
at least.
It is at least. Oh, it's at least 6 million. But it
Okay.
could be 100 times
people
more
are
than
going to
that.
be okay. The people are going to be.
Let me.
I don't think Piers realizes what Nick is actually doing or saying. He is trolling him with this on another level. He said it could be 100 times more.
Let me respond to the rest of your question.
Sure.
What you're saying, I understand where you're coming from when you say it has been documented and there are confessions and so on. Let that speak for itself. But you don't see, your show is called Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Yep.
But the United Kingdom is censored and Europe is censored. And if you talk about these things, you will be put in jail in many countries. And I think that's where a lot of people start to say, well, if the truth is so clear and if there's such overwhelming evidence, why do you need to throw people in jail for disagreeing? And you yourself said, well, there is no debate. I think everything is debatable. I think everything at least should be debated. And if the evidence is very one-sided, let the evidence speak. Don't throw people in jail. So do you think that Holocaust denial laws should be overturned?
I don't particularly agree with Holocaust denial laws. I don't think people should be imprisoned.
Okay.
Well, because I have a blanket view now, which has evolved slightly actually over the years, that I have a blanket view that speech should not be criminalized, right? People should be allowed to say what they want to say, and they should be then made accountable for what they say. If you have an employer, they can make a view about whether you are the right kind of person they want for their employment, as they would make a decision about anything else you do in life. So I actually believe that speech should never be criminalized. It's my personal view. I understand why in places like Germany, they have strong laws about it because they want to move on from what they believe was the most shameful moment in their history. I understand that. Do I want that in my country? No. Am I appalled by what has been going on with free speech in the United Kingdom in the last 2 or 3 years? Absolutely. It is ridiculous that people have been frog marched to prison cells for stuff they put on social media, right? So yeah, I do. I think what is more interesting to me about our exchange is I was not expecting you to go the opposite way. I was not expecting you to be so emphatic that at least 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. And there'll be people watching this who I think will be very surprised by that, because you have built a reputation for being, if not a Holocaust denier, then somebody constantly questioning in a downward way the number of Jews who were murdered. That doesn't appear to be what your position is now.
No, and here's what I would like to see for my entire career. When I started my show, it started with a good faith inquiry where I was questioning a lot of these narratives and I said, what is the answer on the other side? But what I found is that the answer was criminalized. So when you would talk about anything regarding Jews, Israel, the Holocaust, you could be in favor of the official narrative on those things. If you went against, you were banned, censored, and in some countries jailed. And so I actually haven't made up my mind on that because that's not really a matter of interest to me. And there's a lot of analysis and scholarship on both sides of the issue. And I've read both sides of the issue. And honestly, unfortunately, it's hard to judge because there has never been, there's never been a debate on it. And there's never been a debate because of the stigma, because of the censorship. And I think that leads a lot of people to say, well, what do they have to hide? Because you can say on your show, well, I'm personally against Holocaust denial laws, yet they still persist and the social consequences still persist. And I think that that is the anomaly. And people have to wonder, okay, why is it that way? And what I said in that clip is the reason the Holocaust casts a long shadow is because it confers a political benefit upon organized Jewry. That is what they always fall back on. They cannot be criticized, they cannot be named, they cannot be talked about, lest there be another Holocaust. And no other tragedy is treated that way, and no other ethnic group has a get-out-of-jail-free card. Just play that, anti-Semitism and Holocaust. You can do whatever you want and defend all your actions. That's the part that people are getting upset with. That's the